one day soon, I'm going to be the boss.
And I'm going to teach and empower the next generation.
One day soon, I'll use science to save the planet.
And one day soon, I'll save lives.
Right now, I'm ready to take the first step.
No matter what your goal, choose a pathway at Southern Cross University to transform your future.
G'day and welcome to the National Virtual Expo. I'm Rob Malicki on Garrigal Land in Sydney, and welcome to this session on becoming an entrepreneur or starting your own business. My guest today has got a lot of experience to share with you. I think you're going to really love it. But before we get to that, if you have any questions as we go, make sure you drop them in the chat if you're joining us live. And if you're watching this on the replay, thanks for watching. You can ask your questions in the Choosing Your Uni Discord, details down below. And if you're a parent, we have a Facebook community, also linked down below just for you. So please ask your questions. Every single question will get a personal answer, and there's nothing too micro, there's nothing too macro. But let's get into this session with Tori Rose Tucker. Let's go. Victoria, welcome to the National Virtual Expo. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Super excited.
I'm really pumped about today's session because entrepreneurship is so close to my heart. And you're an entrepreneur. You've got heaps of engagement in this space. Tell me about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, wow. Honestly, I would say that it goes right back to my childhood. I was always a little bit entrepreneurial. And I think it was because I grew up with a mum that was a business owner. And being one of 7 kids, we had to be frugal. So I had to get a little bit creative about how to, find ways to make money, to save money. And one, I guess, core memory I can remember is when we used to go on school camps and we would do these fundraisers. And one of the ways in which we would make money would be to get these boxes of chocolates that the school would provide us with and go door to door selling chocolates. And what I realized was that I wasn't getting that much profit from these chocolate bars. So what I did was I went to the supermarket, found the big blocks of chocolate, half price, bought those. And then I would go around selling those for double to triple the price and keep all the profit. And that was one way in which I was like, wow, you just got to be opportunistic and find a way in which to find a bigger gap when it comes to the profit margin. But yeah, that was kind of like the start was in my younger years trying to be frugal. But the real, I guess, interest in entrepreneurship was sparked at university when I came across a poster that was promoting a student startup pitch competition. I didn't even really know what entrepreneurship meant at that point, but I just thought, I have an idea. I could do something with that. So I posted my idea on Facebook, recruited a team. We pitched it and got into the competition. And honestly, the rest is history. Yeah, it's a real fun journey so far. And now I'm working on my own business and it's been very rewarding, very challenging, as you can imagine, but we're really just getting started.
Can't wait to talk more about that. And just talking about the university, of course, you're at the University of New South Wales. We've got a whole session with Sam Brew, who's an entrepreneur, and he's at the University of New South Wales as well,
He's
talking
excellent.
about that UNSW environment because it's literally the best in the country. So folks, if you're here, you're interested in maybe starting your own business, maybe going to uni and getting involved in entrepreneurship, that session is essential viewing. In fact, I'll make sure the link is down in the session description as well, so you can find that down below. Just thinking about ideas for business. So somebody's watching this, they're thinking, what makes a good idea? You're talking about, you found getting chocolates from the supermarket increase your profit margin. That's a good idea. But what makes a good idea for a business?
Yeah, I love that question because all of the time I meet people who are very innovative, they're intelligent, brilliant individuals, but they don't necessarily have ideas for businesses or for startups. And the biggest thing is that it's not necessarily about having the most brilliant novel idea. It's about being curious and being able to identify problems and inefficiencies and ways about doing things better. So I would say it's not about lightning bolts. It's more from a place of curiosity, frustration when things are not built in a way that is it's creating a good user experience, or personal experiences. So things in your day-to-day life where you are constantly finding yourself getting annoyed about how something works or doesn't work, and then going, you know what? I could actually do something about that. And it's that really sparks the best ideas, I believe.
It's funny. It's like sometimes these ideas. It's like scratch your own itch, right? Like
Absolutely.
you've got to fundraise, but you're not actually generating enough revenue out of this thing. How can I actually go and make more money out of this because I want to go and have this experience over here? It's like just a perfect micro example, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean that one is I guess, a more trivial example. It's more about the
Yep.
joy that people get from chocolate, right? But it
Yep.
was also tapping into the value for money. For them, they were buying a small chocolate bar for a high amount, but then I could sell them the bigger one, which for them they seemed like they were getting more chocolate, better value, and for me, I was making more profit. So it was a win-win situation.
Can I ask you about the kind of mega business successes that we see online in the media? Because these are the ones that sort of tend to get held up, don't they? Like
Hmm.
the Facebook and the Atlassian, like these massive companies that just kind of come out and suddenly they're unicorns. But that's kind of not the reality of 99.9% of entrepreneurship, is it?
Hmm. No, it's not. And I think that is probably one of the biggest difficulties with entrepreneurship, is that it is glamorized and it is sold to us as it's a really great way to have freedom in your life and to make a lot of money, get rich, get successful really quickly. And unfortunately, the number of startups and businesses that fail is significantly higher than those that actually succeed. But that's not to discourage people. It is more to say that those that make it are those that are determined to make it. And so, what you'll find is that many of the very successful entrepreneurs that are publicized today have actually had multiple ideas in the back end and things that have flopped and have failed. But instead of taking that as a failure, and that's the end result, they've taken it, they've learned from it, they've reiterated, or they've completely started again. But the key thing is starting again and being willing to keep trying when it's clearly not working in the first place.
So true. It's like the core skill of an entrepreneur is to be able to fail and to be able to get back up and get going again. And maybe by way of that, getting started can be a real challenge. So, what do you think holds people back from starting their own thing, whatever that might be, and what can they do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I've coached hundreds of people at this stage, and that is probably one of the biggest things is the internal dialogue. That's what's really holding people back, and it's the common voices of, "Oh, I'm not ready yet. I don't know where to start. Like I'm not smart enough," and the "What if I fail?" question mark. Um, it's really what I believe it comes down to is a real fear of judgment, especially for young people. They feel as though if they try and fail, that's the most embarrassing thing, and there's a lot of shame around it. And that can also be linked with perfectionism. And what they do oftentimes is they disguise perfectionism with preparation. They think, when I've done this, when I get to this point, when I make enough money, when I'm at this age, then I'll be ready. But really, it's not about getting ready. It's procrastination, and it's finding a way to put it off because it feels risky. And that's really a lot of the time what's holding people back is excuses. If I'm being completely honest, it's not typically actually reality. People could do the thing that they've been thinking about for years, but the excuses are never ending.
So, what do you think? So, somebody's watching this. How would people identify themselves as having an entrepreneurial mindset, and why is that important in young people anyway?
Yeah, so an entrepreneurial mindset really encompasses many things. It's not just about having the thought of being able to start a business, it's really a way of thinking. So, curiosity, I would say, is the number one thing. Number two would be resilience, because it is not a straightforward path. There's going to be many ups and downs. And then initiative is the last one. And that to me really is just about being willing to put yourself out there, being willing to take a no and flip it and be like, okay, it's not yet. It's not necessarily a no, and then finding a way around that no. And honestly, this isn't just useful in entrepreneurship. An entrepreneurial mindset is useful in any career. Some people may have heard of the term entrepreneurship. That's where you take an entrepreneurial mindset and you apply it into the space that you're already in, the industry and the career that you're already in. And it's about having outside of the box thinking, problem solving, and being innovative in the way in which you show up to the workplace. And that's a really valuable trait to have if you want to be more employable too.
It's funny, I've been running my own businesses now for 25 years, and I never, maybe it's only in the last 5 that I kind of went, oh yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. Because to begin with, I didn't think of it in that sense. I just wanted to kind of do something on my own. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to, create something essentially. And a lot of the skills, I was really bad at them to begin with, to be honest, like sales and conversation, all this sort of stuff that you need to know. But you learn them as you go. And suddenly at some point you're like, oh, actually, no, I am actually kind of good at this thing now. So just because you don't see yourself as a salesperson or you don't see yourself as an entrepreneur doesn't mean that in your heart you're not one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is probably one of the biggest hurdles for people is they don't see themselves as fitting the mold of what an entrepreneur should look like. And I think that that is often the difficulty for a lot of young people is that they don't see other super young people out there being successful entrepreneurs. And so that's obviously the first thing that will come up for them as a blocker is I'm too young to do that. I'll have to wait until I've got more experience. To that, I would say absolutely experience is important. But if you are trying to solve a problem that is stemming from a personal experience, you've already got experience. You are someone who is very deep in the weeds of what the pain points are of that problem, of the ways in which the current solutions aren't meeting your needs or have flaws. And so, therefore, it means that you can go and start building something because you've already been in the place in which you've been so frustrated that you know that there needs to be something done. And so you can start thinking about how would I want this problem to be solved.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I feel like you're an entrepreneur if you ever think to yourself, ever, this could be better. This could be done better. If that thought ever occurs to you, whether you're standing at the supermarket and something drives you up the wall, or you're online, doing something and you're just like, man, this sends me crazy, or you're standing in a queue waiting to get something done, if that thought goes through your head like, man, this could surely be better, then there's some kind of little kernel of entrepreneurship in you because you see the problem. And it's actually, when we talk about ideas and stuff like that, it's actually the problem that you're trying to solve when it comes to entrepreneurship, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the big part of it is that you won't feel ready at the start. And confidence doesn't come before action, it comes after. So that's a big thing that I think a lot of people are trying to find is confidence in order to start. And I really challenge that because I think the confidence comes from conversations, small wins, like building evidence that actually you can do it. But you can't do that when you're stuck in your head.
That's very true. We did a whole workshop on day one of the National Virtual Expo on building confidence. So of course you can go back and watch that on the recordings if you're joining us here live today. But I guess also Victoria, that's something that having a coach can also assist with.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I sometimes say is that like borrowing beliefs is a really useful tool. So that could look like talking to mentors, coaches, being in environments that expand you. And it just means you're kind of rubbing up against people who have done the thing or at least have belief in you that you may not necessarily have yet. And that borrowed belief means that, okay, maybe it's not part of my identity now, but if I surround myself with these people in these environments for long enough, it will start to build and it will become more part of my identity.
So what are some ways that people can work through that self-doubt and sort of build that identity?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is just really normalizing it. So
Mm.
realizing that everyone has these thoughts. It's so normal, even for experienced founders, to question themselves, to think maybe I'm not
That's so
smart enough, maybe I don't have what it takes. Even when they are already in the business world and building, they're still going to question themselves. So normalizing it would be the first step. The next thing would be really around separating thoughts from facts. And it's kind of like just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And that honestly comes down to a lot of the time we are our biggest critics. We are the first to be like, that was terrible. Even like with photos, you see a group photo and you will hone in on your picture and be like, oh, that's terrible. And then your friends are like, what do you mean? Like, this is a nice photo of you. Like, we will always be the ones to pick out the tiniest of flaws and blow them up. So it's really about being able to separate thoughts from facts because a lot of the time you may be caught up in the question of, oh, is this a good idea? And instead, the real question is, how can I test this idea? And it's like you can't confirm if it's good or bad. And honestly, there is not the definition of a good or bad idea. It's much more in the approach than the idea itself.
It's so true, isn't it? I mean, you think about some of the mega companies out there, like an Uber, how Uber succeeded, when they were with what they faced, it seemed impossible. And in some ways, you're just like, that's a stupid idea. It already exists. It's called a taxi. And
Yeah,
yet somehow they've managed to grow it into this multi-billion dollar company, which is literally everywhere and has infused everyday life. So it's not
exactly.
about the idea. It's about solving a problem, right?
Mhm.
And then just like working your butt off to make it happen too.
Yes, the hard work is definitely a big element of it for sure. And I think that unfortunately that's oftentimes what scares people away from entrepreneurship. Once they start doing it, they realize, oh, it's not an overnight success. And you will make a lot of forward steps and then have a lot of back steps. And being able to work with that is a really testing process.
So what's the kind of journey? Let's say somebody has an idea, or as we've sort of alluded to in this conversation, sometimes it's like you see a problem that you want to solve, and you don't
Mhm.
necessarily know what the solution is yet. That could be the kernel of of the idea for a solution. So what's the next sort of series of steps if somebody's sort of thinking about that? Maybe they want to have a crack at starting their own business. How do we get started with it?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, or in terms of the most common mistake I've seen people make, is that they jump from seeing a problem to basically getting obsessed with the solution. And they think it's the coolest idea ever, it's very novel or it's brilliant, whatever it is. But you cannot jump from A to B like that. It's actually not A to B. You've kind of gone from A to Z, really. And so what I would say is don't jump to building a full business, spending money on things that, are going to really just drain your resources, your time, your energy. Start with first finding a real problem worth solving, and that involves talking to people. Don't talk to your mum and your friends and people that are going to be your cheerleaders and be like, oh my gosh, it's the best idea. They kind of have to do that. So we want to avoid that encouragement that's not really valid. And you need to talk to the people that are going to be your target market. So that is really the first step is finding a problem worth solving and talking to the people that are in that problem space. And what that looks like sometimes are like surveys, sending out surveys that really just focus on the problem. We're not talking about the solution yet because you really don't know how to solve this problem a lot of the time until you deeply understand where the problem's stemming from, what the root causes are, what the symptoms look like. And oftentimes people try and solve like the whole picture of the problem, and it's just way too complex and it would be too complicated to do. So what I really encourage people to do is to hone in on which part of the problem they want to solve. And when they go out and talk to people, they're trying to understand, okay, are these people experiencing the problem in the same way that I am or that I identified? And you're testing your assumptions around that problem space. Then and only then can you start to actually map out what might a good solution be to this problem. Because if you start on the solution way too early, you'll oftentimes start creating all these features and functions that people do not care about. And there's like a mismatch between the problem and the solution. So that would be like the number one place to start.
I remember hearing on a podcast, might have been Tim Ferriss or something like that, and his guest was saying, how can you test your idea in a weekend?
Mm.
As in, like this idea or solution. What can you create in one weekend of work in order to see if this has legs? And really, like having legs is getting some sort of feedback that kind of validates what you're working on. So it could be a paying customer.
Mm.
It could be like users of a website or something like that. And these days it's fascinating because you can, if you're building something online, using tools like Claude or OpenAI, you can build solutions so fast. But that
Yeah.
in itself isn't enough. Like, you need something that puts some runs on the board that says, yes, this has got some legs. And that could be like you were talking about, like having conversations where whatever data or feedback you get from those conversations, as I say, not your mum, validates the idea that you've got. But spending just a weekend can be enough to at least get on track. I mean, outside of that though, how do people manage this idea of like starting something, but they might also be going to uni, they might have casual work, and they're trying to balance all these different elements. How do you suggest that people take that on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And transparently, I've launched my own coaching business, but I also have a full-time job. So I am juggling those, and it's very much like when I'm not working my full-time job, I'm working my business. I have the benefit of not having children at this point in my life, so I have a bit more flexibility around that. But of course, when you are a student, you've got studies, and that can be super stressful and take up your brain capacity. And then if you're a parent, there's a lot of other people's needs that you have to consider. The big thing is that I think in the beginning it's so important to think in micro steps, not giant leaps. And you are really just building the rungs of the ladder. Um, and what that might look like is like an example pathway is that you have an idea come up and you're like, okay, I'm going to do a brain dump, get that down on paper. A really, really great resource for having everything all in one page is a lean canvas model. And we can drop in a link for that. It's just a simple one-page template that gets you to think about all the basics of what this idea might look like and what are your assumptions about this idea at this point in time. And what you're going to do is you're going to test your assumptions that you have written down on paper through conversations, through surveys, through research. So you can Google. There's going to be a lot of publicly available research that's already out there that could help you validate or invalidate your assumptions. And then from there, you're going, okay, here's what I found. Here are the key patterns, the key themes that are really popping up. And it could be that everybody's experiencing this emotional response when it comes to this pain point. I'm like, okay, how do I test that? So you would come up with a really simple prototype or like a landing page, something that's super low investment. Don't want to spend a lot of money. You don't want to spend a lot of time on anything at this stage. And it's going, okay, how can I test the appetite, the interest, the resonance of what I'm trying to build? Because really, the biggest mistake is you're going to spend hours and hours investing time and energy into something that nobody wants, right? And if you're already juggling school, kids, work, that's the last thing that you want to do. So thinking about a really simple way to test the assumptions that you've made, that's where I would start. Once you've got that, you can start to go, okay, I can see how a very small, simple offer could be created from here. That literally could look like a free ebook that people will receive that just kind of gets them interested, and then you have like their email address, so you can send them more resources, which later down the track might lead to an actual paid product or service that they could be more likely to want to learn about because you've given them something valuable through the free ebook. And from that process, you're going to get feedback because if you get nobody responding, then clearly you haven't developed something valuable in the first instance. So you're going to have to go back to the drawing board, reiterate, and think, okay, why is nobody clicking through onto my link? Is it the language that I'm using? Is it the way in which I'm communicating with them, the platform? Am I not talking to the right people? There's just always going to be questions in the beginning stage, and you have to just stay curious and keep digging through those questions before you really start building.
Yeah, I would say that's very true. Certainly in my experience, the things that have worked almost invariably have not been the things that we thought were going to work right up front. Because once you get started and you put something out into the world, you're constantly learning. And that's where you're like, oh, okay, well, they didn't want this, but they liked this part of it. Let's do more of that. And so you do
Exactly.
more of that. And then something else works, and then you do more of that. And that's how businesses grow. And I love what you say about, basically not needing to spend a lot of money on it, on this. One of the best bits of advice when we were starting our first business 20 years ago was from my brother-in-law who said, "Oh no, start with no money because your mistakes will be less expensive."
Yeah. Yeah. And
And it's
honestly, a lot of young people think they can't start because they don't have money. And
yeah,
I really challenge that. I think so many entrepreneurs started with no money. It's an excuse you can work around.
and and that's why getting into this stuff when you're at university is such a great idea because you end up in a community of people. You have people that can support you and give you some guidance, but you don't have to necessarily have money. What you're looking for is that experience and that network to help guide you. And let's think about that parents because we do have a lot of parents registered for the National Virtual Expo. What about them? If we've got parents watching along today, what can they do to support their kids if their kids are interested in starting their own business?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is don't panic because a lot of parents think, oh no, my child wants to be an entrepreneur. It's coming with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk. And I would really encourage parents to shift from the is this safe kind of question to what could they learn? Encourage experimentation over perfection because I just know that when I was involved with entrepreneurship in university, it was such a valuable learning experience that was so practical and hands-on outside of the classroom experience. And I just really found value in trying, failing, and then figuring things out. So I would really encourage parents to lean into that. And support doesn't mean removing all risk. It doesn't mean, lending them thousands of dollars from the get-go if they haven't had any validation and real evidence to prove that what they're doing is going to be valuable. But it means helping them think through it, be available to have conversations with them about it, be a sounding board. I am so confident that there'll be a lot of parents that have had career paths that they would be able to glean a lot of insights from and share with their children. So yeah, that would be what I would say. Just lean into it and encourage them to experiment.
You're not going to say this, but I'm going to say it because I think it's important. But if you want your kid to learn a musical instrument, you would pay for them to go and to have some lessons. If you want your kids to get educated on just about anything, you're going to pay for them to go on a class and get tutored on it. And so
Hmm.
having a coach, for example, who can take you through that process, to me is something that a parent can actionably do, is to make an
Hmm.
investment in that initial education for your child to understand the kind of how entrepreneurship works, how running a business works. And obviously someone like you, Victoria, and there'll be other people in that space too that you can look up, I think is incredibly valuable because one of the hardest things I feel about entrepreneurship is that it seems all mysterious. How do I run this business?
Hmm.
And you got to figure it all out for yourself. Except you don't. You're
No.
a parent. You can support your kids to not have to figure it all out themselves because there are people who can help you on that journey to shortcut things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is really where my work leans into is that very first part of the journey is having somebody as a sounding board when you're like, am I crazy? Is this actually a good idea? And having someone to just be there to listen, to challenge you when you may have some thoughts that aren't particularly productive. They may be self-limiting beliefs or things that are going to be blockers in the early stages, but then to also just sit with you and go, okay, well, what does action look like? You've been thinking about this for a long time, but how can we actually take you from from thinking to action? And that's honestly one of the biggest parts too, is when you have somebody to keep you accountable, because if it's in your head, nobody knows that you were thinking about it. And so therefore you can give up whenever you want because there's no one to hold you accountable. So having somebody externally that knows about what you're trying to build is a really valuable thing.
If someone's here and they're thinking, oh, like I'm curious about it, I really want to, but I'm not ready, like I don't want to take the risk. What advice would you have for them?
Point blank, I would say that readiness is a myth. That is never going to happen. You're never going to be ready. And really, you have to start before you feel confident. I had a woman that I coached for 2 years, and she had a long list of reasons why she wasn't ready, and it was too hard. And she was a mom, and she had worked full time, and there was a real lack of confidence in her. And I heard her. They were all very true things, very real, and she was very dedicated as a mum to helping her daughter reach her goals. So I sat with her and said, look, like this is about progress, not perfection. If we can move just one step closer towards where you want to be, it doesn't have to be each day, it could be each week, 1 to 2 hours a week. I think everybody has that to give up and to commit towards a business idea. And the thought of I'm not ready oftentimes comes from feeling as though you have to do everything right straight away, which is not the case. It's about progress over perfection always. So for me, when I look at it, like her journey, it was very much like in the early stages, there were micro steps, very small things. And I think about it in kind of a metaphor where it's like you have a destination that you want to get to. It could be the Blue Mountains. If you have a car and you've got your foot on the accelerator, no matter how fast or slow you're going, eventually you are going to get there if you're pointed in the right direction, right? So at some points you may have a whole weekend free and you can put your foot down on that accelerator and go, an extra 50 k's per hour, make a whole lot more progress and momentum, which is fantastic. There will be some weeks where you are drowning in homework, you're working, your kids are wanting lots of things from you, whatever it is. And so you will take your foot off the pedal a little bit, maybe make one bit of progress, talk to one person. That's not going to get you so much further, but it's still going to keep getting you to closer and closer towards your destination. And I think that's how we really have to see it, is so long as we're doing something, that's so much better than doing nothing. And the more you do it, the more you will feel confident in yourself.
My guest in this session has been Victoria Rose Tucker. And Victoria, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm most, I would say, available on LinkedIn or Instagram. Victoria Rose Coaching is where you'll find me on Instagram, or on LinkedIn, Victoria Rose Tucker. I have free discovery calls for people who have an idea and don't know where to get started. And that session is very much just about helping you get clear on where you are versus where you want to be. There's no obligation. It's just exploratory. But I also have a full program that is about helping people go from idea to implementation and launch, if that is where people are at.
If you want to grab one of those discovery calls, that's such a great idea if you're thinking about it. If you just want a bit of guidance on whether or not this might be for you, check out down in the session description below. We've got a link directly through to that, so you can get in touch with Victoria. Super good to chat with you as part of the National Virtual Expo. Thank you for sharing your expertise today.
Of course, I've loved it.
I got my first grade at uni, and I just laughed out loud. It wasn't just a pass, I actually got a high distinction, and I'd always done terrible at school. I did the PSP course at SEU, which gave me the foundations of what you need to be able to study at uni, and I didn't fail that, got good grades, so I was like, hey, we'll keep going. Studied a bachelor in psych, did all right, so I kept going and got into honours, and now I'm writing a thesis. Getting that first grade was the first time that I felt like I can actually do this, and it has led me to get to where I am now, and I'm really grateful of it.
Well, I hope you got something out of this session. And if you have any questions at all, you can head to choosingyouruni.com and ask Lumen. Lumen is your AI guide who knows about every university, every pathway, every option that we've talked about throughout this virtual expo. And Lumen is available to talk to you 24/7. So it's ready when you are.